Morning. It's the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast, and I am your host, Richie. On this somewhat rainy Sunday in St. Cloud, Florida, I am going to be hitting on Hollywood losing a true great in the form of Mr. Carl Weathers. We're going to be speaking on Taylor Swift and her availability for the Super Bowl. As many of you know, she has been a godsend in terms of revenue for the NFL since dating Chief superstar Travis Kelce. My New York Knicks finally take a L against the great LeBron James and his underachieving Los Angeles Lakers, but they were not underachieving last night. They played a heck of a game. We're going to talk about the WWE taking a bit of a detour in terms of their main event for WrestleMania. And we've got some heat going on between a former league MVP taking shots at the NFC quarterback representative in Brock Purdy and a former NFL Hall of Famer chimed in as well. We're going to start this up with Mr. Carl Weathers, the former Raider turned actor, his legacy from the Rocky series to The Mandalorian, and Sylvester Stallone shared some heartfelt tributes on social media for him yesterday. For those of you who don't know, Carl Weathers made a huge impact in Hollywood. His contributions to the Rocky series were amazing. And what I love about what Sylvester Stallone did yesterday is that he really put it in perspective as to how important the Apollo Creed character was, taking you through a trip through the Rocky series. In part one, Apollo Creed was the ultra cocky, ultra flamboyant, ultra talented heavyweight champion. He could not find a contender to go head to head with him. He loved the Italian Stallion nickname, which Balboa was, also being a local kid from Philadelphia. Apollo gives him the 1,000,001 shot to try to take his title. Apollo won. The fight was epic. It kind of led to a part two because originally Rocky was supposed to be a one-off. It was never intended to be a series. Apollo Creed in the fourth installment of the Rocky franchise was tragically killed on screen by Ivan Drago. It led to, you know how the country was in the 80s. It was during the Cold War. Rocky goes to Russia, avenges his friend. Back in 2020, during the pandemic year, Rocky said that Carl, who was a lifelong friend of his, was kind of ribbing him about killing him off too early. And Sylvester Stallone did indeed say, in retrospect, he thinks he may have made an error by killing off the Creed character. The Creed character has its indelible legacy in this series because Michael B. Jordan, who is a top 5 man in Hollywood, plays the son of Apollo Creed, and he has currently done 3 Creed movies, the most recent without Sylvester Stallone, kind of setting up the Creed character to stand on his own too. And to my surprise, that Creed series has been incredible. Contributions in Predator alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger, as well as Jesse the Body Ventura. Most recently in the Mandalorian series, he also played Action Jackson. And the reason why I want to hone in on Action Jackson is because for an African-American actor to take the lead role in an action movie during that era was not as common as I believe it could have been. Granted, you had another former player turned actor who did very well in the form of Jim Brown. But in that regard, I think Carl Weathers was ahead of himself, and I think it opened the door for a lot of guys that were maybe in the entertainment field, the sports field, that turned into great actors. But a sad day because I'll tell you the truth, it's a part of my childhood that goes leaving. Because the Rocky series is very important to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And in my personal case, I've always found them entertaining, but also rather inspirational. And Carl Weathers, in terms of his character and what it meant for the first 4 installments of that franchise, it was all heart. The guy was incredible. I think where he really shined in the series was in part 3, playing the role of Rocky's trainer after Rocky's trainer passed away in the series. Of course, I'm talking about Mickey Goldmill. He was phenomenal on so many metrics, so many levels. Really had his own style and his own personality that made him stand out in the 1980s, where you had a lot of action guys that even led into the 90s. You know, you had Stallone, you had Schwarzenegger, you had after that Van Damme and Seagal. But Carl Weathers, to his credit, always stood on his own too. Definitely was never some kind of fill-in. He definitely held his position very highly. And truly a class act. Any interview you ever heard of him, with him rather, you know, I would call him the anti-Hollywood guy, so to speak, because he was so humble, and it's incredibly refreshing to see a human being like that you know, had the success that he had, but still was able to keep it as humble as he did. So I speak on anyone here that contributes to my show, that we sent our heartfelt condolences to the Weathers family. Not a lot of people like him, and he is going to be sorely missed. And, you know, I say to myself about how incredible this Creed series has been with Michael B. Jordan. Without the contributions of Carl Weathers in the 70s and 80s and the Rocky series, there would be no extension with the Creed character. And you know, whenever you see Michael B. Jordan doing great things with that character, you have no other choice but to back it up to Carl Weathers. Now, Carl Weathers, granted, in terms of Rocky lore, passed away in the 80s, so to speak. But similar to on screen in Rocky and similar to in the Game of Life, he will always live through his many works. And it was a very sad day. I wanted to go live yesterday, but just didn't have the gumption to do so. Wanted to kind of process it. I'll be honest, he was one of my all-time favorites. And we're going to take it from the great Carl Weathers to speaking about a pop star that is constantly in front of the camera for the NFL right now. I'm talking about Miss Taylor Swift. Unless you live under a rock, as you know, she is dating the best tight end in professional football today by the name of Travis Kelce. His Kansas City Chiefs are one half of the Super Bowl representatives. A week from today, they will be playing the San Francisco 49ers in Las Vegas. She has a huge tour and a show in Japan the night before the Super Bowl. So I'm honing in on, will she make it? Apparently, it looks like it would be brutal coming back, but it is doable. And quite frankly, seeing how supportive she's been of her significant other, Mr. Kelce, I do believe that one way or the other, we will see Taylor Swift in the building. The NFL product, Chiefs merchandise in general, viewership has just gone even way further up since Taylor Swift has been involved in the relationship with Kelce, as well as being an avid Chiefs supporter. So if I had to take a guess, I believe personally that Taylor Swift will be in the building. As the game goes, we're going to give you a detailed Super Bowl preview show. And in tradition of what we do going all the way back to the Jordan Patrick show, we will likely go live the morning of Super Bowl Sunday as well. That's the first show ever that I did with this podcasting, and that's always a tradition that we always go live on Super Bowl Sunday. Oddly enough, the very first show of the Jordan Patrick show, which ultimately morphed into the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast, was actually the Chiefs and 49ers Super Bowl. So some tradition there. A former league MVP takes shot at Mr. Irrelevant turned Super Bowl starter. I, of course, am talking about Cam Newton being the former league MVP. He also played in the Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos, which was Peyton Manning's final game. Brock Purdy being drafted as Mr. Irrelevant. Heck of a story. Took the L to the Eagles last year in the NFC title game, was injured very early in that game. 49ers essentially did not have a functional quarterback, and it was an unfair situation. He gets them back to the big game this year. bailing them out in a couple of moments these past couple of weeks against the Packers and Lions, respectively, where I think that Purdy has shown more than just being a game manager. Cam Newton has had some choice words and essentially saying that Brock Purdy is overrated. Brock Purdy stood on his own too and gave it right back to Cam Newton, as he should. You have to protect and stand up for yourself when you're being tore up by a fellow former athlete and, you know, a fellow athlete. I was not too pleased with Cam. I feel that Cam, while he might have a case that he still belongs in the NFL, I don't necessarily think he's a starter anymore. And I think that's part of the holdup as to why Cam is currently not on a roster. Because while he might say in interviews that there's not 31 other or 32 other quarterbacks better than him, I think the part that he doesn't understand is that he might be somewhere in between 32 and 40, which means that he's probably going to be a backup at this juncture of his career. And quite frankly, Cam does not want to be a backup. You take in some of the side shenanigans, and I can understand to a level why no one after his New England stint turned reunited with Carolina really wants to take another chance on Cam. Do I still think he could play? Yes, I do. Now enter former Super Bowl champion and Pro Football Hall of Famer Warren Sapp, who has never shied away from giving his 2 cents. He basically said to Cam Newton, "You are a glorified running back." Now, when you consider that in Cam Newton's rookie year, he broke Peyton Manning's numbers for passing touchdowns, I don't necessarily believe that he was just a running quarterback. However, when the injuries started mounting, I do believe that Cam Newton, during the course of the latter part of his career, did become one-dimensional. And I do believe it's part of the reason why he lost his gig in Carolina, and I think ultimately never evolved his game to the next level. When he was a member of the New England Patriots, as he was the first quarterback who replaced the great Tom Brady, I believe he was playing at a decent enough level before contracting the COVID virus. And when he came back, he just didn't look like the same guy. Now, granted, this is when COVID was rampant and when, you know, we were still kind of on our heels figuring out how to deal with it. But I don't like when guys tear other guys down. I don't think it's right. I think there's a fraternity, especially amongst quarterbacks, where you got to support each other and cheer each other on. I personally enjoyed watching Cam Newton as a player. And while I do, from time to time, tune into his shows, I am a little disappointed in tearing another quarterback down. Just not something that I'm with. And I think Cam Newton can do better. I applaud Brock Purdy for blocking out the noise and just focusing on what he has to do this week, which is try to win the San Francisco 49ers their 6th Super Bowl title, which would tie them with the New England Patriots and Pittsburgh Steelers for the most in the Super Bowl era. And it would be the 49ers' first Super Bowl victory since the 94 season. And speaking of the 94 season, shouts out Mr. William Barnum Floyd. He was a member of that 94 squad with the great Steve Young, the great Deion Sanders, and the great Jerry Rice. I'm sure he is going to be tuning in and going to be very proud to see his 49ers potentially hoist another Lombardi. But they got to go through the world champions, a team that finds themselves constantly in championship weekend or in the Super Bowl itself. And at this juncture, if the Kansas City Chiefs do indeed win this game, they officially become a dynasty, folks, the first dynasty since the New England Patriots. So a lot on the line. San Francisco also has revenge on the mind because, as I already stated earlier in the show, they did play in a Super Bowl a few years back, 2019 season, where the Niners blew a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter. That was with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo plays for the Raiders. The game is in the Raiders Stadium, but now it's Brock Purdy for the 49ers. It's going to be a hell of a game. We're going to be ramping it up as we get closer to Super Sunday. Going to be very exciting. Two very deserving teams. The New York Knicks finally bust up their winning streak, in part due to LeBron James. Lakers defense, in my opinion, was the difference in this one in the fourth quarter. Lakers still very much look like best case scenario play-in team, possibly missing the playoffs altogether. But they did rise to the occasion. It's a third loss in the last 17 games. No need to hit the panic button, Knicks. But I will say that we are going to be catching some L's here and there because it's hard to compensate for all the injuries the Knicks currently have. But I am a firm believer that you got to weather the storm when guys are hurt, and you don't want to force them back into your lineup too early. Jalen Brunson, who's been playing out of his head, did struggle a little bit. It's going to happen from time to time. I just want the Knicks to be healthy to make their true playoff push run in the near future. Blip in the road. Let's get a W next game, Knicks. And let's not allow this to become a losing streak after enjoying 9 consecutive victories. I really do enjoy the direction that the Knicks are going in, and I am not overly concerned right now. We will see how it plays out. Taking it over to wrestling. Rock and Roman Reigns equals must-see TV. Will these two get it on at WrestleMania? I think it's a foregone conclusion that that's the way it's going to go. Friday Night SmackDown broke the internet as Cody Rhodes originally addressed Roman Reigns. Cody Rhodes did win the Royal Rumble, which puts the superstar in a position to choose the champion that he wants to challenge at the big show, WrestleMania, which is essentially wrestling Super Bowl. Cody did something that I don't think the storyline for us as fans saw coming. He takes a step to the side to allow The Rock to address Roman Reigns. There was no verbiage. It was just a classic stare down of 2 generational talents as the show won off the air. Recently on this show, we have spoken about how this could be a true gate crusher and why it might happen sooner than later. I think WWE did a good job of kind of holding back and not, giving too much of a spoiler, because I think most people felt this confrontation was going to happen a year from now, kind of like the way that they built up Rock and Cena. So kind of a cool curveball that WWE threw here. And I think it's going to be a heck of a match. And while a lot of people are insinuating and speculating that Roman Reigns' reign is going to come to an end soon, there's a lot of, I guess you could say, question if they should put the belt on a guy who is a super part-timer in the form of The Rock. One thing I'm going to give The Rock props on, though, is that he is one of the biggest stars, similar to the aforementioned Michael B. Jordan in Hollywood, but he keeps coming back to the place that put him on originally. And when you consider all the controversy going on with Vince McMahon leaving TKO and all the accusatory stuff, for The Rock to get back into wrestling right now, quite frankly, it's just huge for the brand. And I do believe that this is going to be a hell of a storyline. As Cody Rhodes goes, I must admit I'm a little surprised that he's taken the back seat. I think it's part of the business to be a team player. But having said that, this is not something that I saw coming. Last year, most of America, most people who watch wrestling wanted Cody to take the belt off of Roman Reigns. He did everything other than do that. It was a hell of a main event. A lot of juicy storylines that came out of it leading up and during and after the match. The Uso brothers helped Roman retain the title. But I must admit, this is going to be good stuff, and I look forward to it. I'm going to flip it over to boxing. Want to see if I can get some feedback here on this. Crawford versus Canelo. Do you guys and girls think that Crawford is making a huge mistake having to step up this higher in weight? As a boxing enthusiast, I believe that whenever you step up in weight like this, you are welcoming a potential disadvantage because you're not used to taking hits, power shots, I should say, of that level, because the bigger the fighters, the bigger the power shots. Having said that, I do believe that this could go the distance, and we could be surprised where Canelo could potentially be in trouble. I still want to see Canelo and Ben Benitez. I don't know why we are still waiting to see that. But I got to give props for Crawford for giving the boxing fans what they want, going up in weight. And I think it's just part of being great. You know, taking on any and all comers is truly part of being great. As we tomorrow, well, technically today, officially start Super Bowl week, I wanted to hit on a couple of moments of the past that occurred. One was an anniversary date yesterday that I do want to speak on. Something very dear to my heart as a sports fan. It was, in my opinion, a top 5 upset in the history of sports. And I am just typing this in and bringing it in right now. Eli and the Giants defeat the undefeated Patriots. Hard to believe that yesterday made 16 years that this phenomenal upset occurred. To give you the backstory, during the 2007 season, the Patriots season started with controversy as the allegations of Spygate arose during their beating of the New York Jets in Week 1, where someone from the Patriots sideline was seen. The Patriots shook it off and basically dominated the NFL in a way that I don't think any of us have ever truly seen in our lifetimes. Patriots' final game of the season was against the New York Giants, a Giants team that had clinched a playoff berth the previous week in Buffalo, and they had no incentive to start their starters other than to stay sharp and to show pride. In New England's case, they were going for NFL history. They had already crushed the previous undefeated team, the Miami Dolphins, who only played a 14-game slate back then. So by winning that particular game, they would go 16-0 to basically be viewed as the greatest regular season team of all time. They overcame a 2-score deficit late in the fourth in a classic matchup and defeated the Giants 38-35 in the old Giants Stadium in a shootout. Fast forward a month later, the New York Giants doing it the hard way, winning multiple games on the road, similar to what the Kansas City Chiefs have had to do this year. The second matchup took on a completely different situation, whereas both teams scored on their opening possessions, the Giants with a field goal, the Patriots with a touchdown from Lawrence Maroney. They then proceeded to go the longest amount of time without a score in the history of the Super Bowl, which led to a high-octane final 10 minutes of the fourth quarter, where you saw Eli Manning hook up with David Tyree for a touchdown. That was responded by late in the game, Tom Brady to Randy Moss, what looked like at the time was the final nail in the coffin and the culmination of a Patriots' perfect season. What happened next in the final 2 minutes of the drive saw Adalius Thomas, as well as others, appear to have Eli Manning dead to rights for a potential sack. Somehow, some way, Eli was able to shake off all of the pass rushers, do something that no quarterback should do in a situation like that, which is desperately throw the ball in the middle of the field. What occurs next? All-Pro Rodney Harrison, draped all over the same David Tyree, number 85, who scored the touchdown earlier, catches the ball over his head, comes down almost like a folded table, but managed to not lose the football. Now, granted, the game was not over yet. The Giants still had to score. Eli Manning almost threw a pick in this game, which could have ended it, but Asante Samuel lost concentration, didn't catch a sure interception. Moments later, after this Tyree play, I think the Patriots were just gutted. They couldn't believe that they gave up that kind of gain. Plaxico Burress fade route, back of the end zone, kind of calmly catches it, turning in. Patriots had one last chance. Tom Brady threw a missile down the sidelines that was just out of the reach of the great Randy Moss. The Giants overcame so much to become world champions. It's just one chapter in a lot of great stories of Super Bowls. But as a sports fan, I must admit that that was probably, to this day, my greatest triumph as a fan. Defeating the previously undefeated Patriots and getting a small measure of revenge in the Boston-New York rivalry, because just a few years earlier, the New York Yankees blew a 3-0 lead to the Boston Red Sox with a trip to the World Series on the line. Good stuff. Really, really good stuff. And I also want to mention another anniversary date. Doug Williams, this past weekend, it's his anniversary date of becoming the first African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl. Good stuff all around the board. And when I think about the ascension of black quarterbacks around the league, one cannot ever overlook Doug Williams for opening the door for so many, similar to what Carl Weathers did in Hollywood. The Redskins at that time, now the Commanders, led by Joe Gibbs, are the only NFL franchise to win 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks with the same coach. And that is why sometimes I do believe that Joe Gibbs needs to be in the top 5 or spoken about a little more. He left racing, came back to football, and righted the ship for the Washington Redskins during the mid-2000s when they were led by Sean Taylor. May he rest in peace. Joe Gibbs, a phenomenal coach. The eras were just so great. You had so many phenomenal coaches back then, from Bill Walsh to Bill Parcells. Just so many. So many. It's Super Bowl week. We look to be back soon. Yankee fans, got to ask you this. Do you guys and girls feel good enough about the rotation? I want Blake Snell. Yankees, make it happen. Bring back Blake Snell. Have Nasty Nestor, Clark Schmidt compete for that number 5 spot. And for those of you who watch the show, get at me in the comments. I want to know if you guys feel comfortable all the way through with this lineup that the Yankees currently have. And before I get out of here, I do want to say one thing. In the Pro Bowl, rest in peace. What I mean by this is I miss the era where after Super Bowl weekend, you would have Pro Bowl weekend. Back then, it was always year in and year out in Honolulu. Excuse me. And guys took this game so very seriously. Sean Taylor, may he rest in peace, who I already mentioned, put the smackdown on the Buffalo punter in a game. There was a different kind of pride that used to be shown in this game. And the other thing is, you had guys even a week after playing in the Super Bowl playing this game. Jim Kelly made the Super Bowl 4 consecutive years, and he was constantly in this game. It's not the best brand situation at all when guys don't take this game serious. They're turning it into flag football, literally. And while I love Peyton and Eli, and while I love the Manning cast, this is a game that sadly has fallen from once upon a time just being such a great thing. And I also want to ask on this. Doc Rivers is coaching the East in their NBA All-Star game. I want your guys' feedback on why this is so ridiculous. Even Doc Rivers, to his credit, who recently became the new Milwaukee Bucks coach, something I appreciate that Doc's going to do is that anything he makes off of this game, he's actually going to give it to the previous Milwaukee coach who he replaced. I think it's a class move on Doc's part because him being fired so many different times, I think, speaking to the importance of a fraternity and not tearing each other down, I believe it's a really good look that he is willing to take whatever he makes on this game and send it to the previous Milwaukee coach, because although it didn't work out, I do believe that Doc has the class and the wherewithal of being an NBA lifer to know that it is only right for that to happen. A lot going on around the sports world, and I look forward to this coming week and we're going to be bringing you some shows, football related, about Super Bowls of the past, as well as our detailed Super Bowl preview. 49ers, Chiefs, it's going to be a phenomenal game. And it's always exciting when teams lock horns for a second time. And it's just another chapter in one of the greatest books ever written, which is the history of the Super Bowl. Got to kind of feel for the folks out in Baltimore, and especially the folks out in Detroit. I'm sure they have that empty feeling, still kind of like in mourning of getting so close. And it's going to be interesting to see how those two teams respond going into the new year. NFL draft will soon follow, and the new league year will be right after that. So right before that, rather. So lots to talk about, lots to look forward to, and we got baseball on the horizon. We're going to be hitting you with our divisional previews all over MLB in the near future as well. Announcements to come. Pro Bowl is here in Orlando. If you guys are attending, please be safe out there. Weather's not the best right now. Should be clearing up later. I wish every one of you an excellent Sunday. And it's a Sunday without a real football game, which sadly is something that we have to get used to after the Super Bowl. Until next time, I am Richie. Have a great day, everyone. Make today count.